He thought he'd walk free. The jury thought otherwise. Before this story pulls you under, hit subscribe, tap like, and leave a comment. Because once you step into this case, there's no turning back. The sirens arrive too late. Red and blue lights splash across the rain-slicked pavement outside the old Riverside Marina, a place locals avoided after dark. The Mississippi rolled past in silence, thick and black, carrying secrets downstream. A patrol cruiser idled near the boat ramp, its headlights fixed on something half hidden by reeds and rope. A body lay face down at the water's edge, jacket soaked, shoes missing, one hand clenched around a torn scrap of paper that refused to let go. Detective Mara Ellison stepped out into the cold, her breath fogging as she took in the scene. The wind smelled like rusted metal and river algae. This wasn't a random spot. Whoever left the body here knew the tides, knew how evidence disappeared in moving water. She crouched, careful not to disturb the mud, and nodded to the medical examiner. No visible wounds. No obvious trauma. Just a man in his early 40s, dressed too well for this place, with a look on his face that suggested surprise more than fear. The wallet was gone. The phone, too. But the scrap of paper remained, soaked and crumpled, ink bleeding into nothing. Ellison glanced at it, then looked back at the river. He didn't fall, she said quietly. He was brought by sunrise. The victim had a name, Daniel Mercer, real estate developer, community donor, married, 2 kids, a house with a river view, and a garage full of cars that never saw dirt. On paper, Mercer's life was clean, too clean. The kind of man who shook hands at fundraisers and smiled for photos. The kind juries trusted without thinking twice. Across town, Evan Rowe was awake before the knock came. Rowe sat at his kitchen table, coffee untouched, staring at a laptop open to a half-written email. Outside, the neighborhood stirred, dogs barking, garbage trucks grinding their way down the street. When the doorbell rang, he didn't jump. He closed the laptop instead, as if he'd been waiting for the sound all night. The officers were polite, professional. They asked if he knew Daniel Mercer. Rowe nodded. He didn't ask why. He grabbed his jacket and keys, locked the door behind him, and followed them out. Neighbors watched from behind curtains. Rowe kept his eyes forward. At the station, Ellison studied him through the glass. Mid-30s. Former project manager. Recently laid off. No criminal record. Clean clothes. Steady hands. The kind of man who believed rules worked both ways. He asked for a lawyer immediately, then answered what he could. Yes, he knew Mercer. Yes, they'd met recently. No, he hadn't been to the marina. Ellison slid a photo across the table. Mercer at a charity event, smiling. When was the last time you saw him? Rowe's jaw tightened. 2 days ago. And where was that? Rowe hesitated. Just long enough. At his office. The investigation moved fast and slow at the same time. Surveillance footage from downtown showed Mercer leaving his office late. Rain starting to fall. His car pulling into traffic. Cameras near the marina were broken. Had been for months. A bartender remembered Mercer arguing with someone earlier that evening. A neighbor recalled Rowe's car leaving home around midnight, though they weren't certain. The river gave nothing back. Ellison followed the money. Mercer's finances were a maze of shell companies and quiet settlements. Confidential agreements tied to a construction project that had gone wrong years earlier. Rowe's name appeared there, buried in paperwork like a ghost. A whistleblower payout. An NDA. A lawsuit that vanished before trial. Rowe's lawyer argued coincidence. He painted Mercer as a man with enemies, business rivals, strangers who wanted his money or his reputation. Rowe, he said, was a convenient target, a disgruntled former employee with nothing to lose. The press ate it up. Headlines questioned police competence. Opinion shows debated reasonable doubt before charges were even filed. Then the divers found Mercer's shoes. They were wedged beneath the dock, laces tied together, weighted with a rusted chain. It wasn't proof of who, but it was proof of intent. Someone had staged the scene. Someone had wanted the river to do the rest. Ellison returned to Rowe's house with a warrant. The place was orderly to the point of obsession. No blood, no weapons, no phone belonging to Mercer. In the garage, beneath shelves of labeled boxes, she noticed fresh concrete along the back wall, a patch that didn't match the rest of the floor. Rose stood in the doorway as they worked, face unreadable. "I told you," he said calmly. "You won't find anything." They jackhammered to the concrete, dust filling the air, neighbors gathering again. Beneath the slab was a shallow cavity. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a second phone, Mercer's phone. The screen was cracked, the battery dead, but the SIM card was intact. Ellison held it up. "You still sure about that?" Rowe didn't answer. For the first time, something flickered behind his eyes. Not fear, not anger, but calculation. The kind that comes when a plan changes. Later that night, as technicians worked to recover data, Ellison studied the scrap of paper found in Mercer's hand. After drying and careful restoration, a single word emerged from the blur of ink: basement. They traced it to Mercer's office building, a renovated warehouse with locked storage rooms below street level. The property manager unlocked the door, the metal groaning as it opened. The lights flickered on, revealing rows of cages filled with forgotten files. At the far end, behind a false wall, they found a room that wasn't on any blueprint. And when they opened it, everything they thought they knew about Daniel Mercer and Evan Rowe changed forever. The room behind the false wall smelled of dust and old paper, but beneath it was something sharper, metallic, like fear left too long in a sealed space. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow on metal shelves stacked with boxes. Each box was labeled in neat black ink. Names, dates, case numbers. Detective Mara Ellison felt her pulse climb as she read them. Daniel Mercer hadn't just been a developer, he'd been a collector. Inside the boxes were files, thick, meticulously organized, detailing lawsuits that never reached court, accusations that disappeared, complaints resolved quietly with settlements and ironclad non-disclosure agreements. Some files included photos. Others held recorded statements, transcripts, and handwritten notes. Patterns emerged fast. The same law firm, the same shell companies, the same final outcome. Silence. "This isn't storage," Ellison said softly. "It's insurance." The task force worked through the night. Analysts cross-referenced names, dates, financial records. Mercer had been paying people for years, not just to keep quiet, but to keep leverage. He documented everything. Every threat, every agreement, every weakness. If someone crossed him, he had the proof to ruin them. Evan Rowe's file was thicker than most. Ellison opened at last. Rowe had been a project manager on one of Mercer's developments a decade earlier, a residential complex rushed to completion under questionable safety approvals. When a structural flaw was discovered, Mercer buried it. Rowe objected. He documented everything. Emails, reports, warnings. When he threatened to go public, Mercer sued him into the ground, then settled quietly, binding Rowe with an NDA so strict it destroyed his career. At the bottom of the file was something Ellison hadn't expected, a transcript of a recorded meeting dated 6 months earlier. Mercer's voice was calm, almost bored. Rowe's was tight, controlled. "You took everything from me," Rowe said. "I compensated you," Mercer replied. "You erased me." A pause. Then Mercer again. "Careers end. Mine didn't. Yours did. That's how this works." Ellison closed the file. The motive was no longer theoretical. Across town, Evan Rowe sat alone in an interrogation room, hands folded, eyes fixed on the table. His lawyer paced. News of the basement had already leaked. The media narrative flipped overnight. Mercer was no longer just a victim. He was a predator hiding behind contracts and influence. Rowe remained silent. When Ellison entered, she didn't sit. She stood, letting the weight of the room press in. "We found the files," she said. "We know what he did." Rowe looked up slowly. "Then you know why this is what it looks like." Ellison watched him carefully. "Help me understand." Rowe exhaled. "I went to see him because he asked, said he wanted to clean things up, admit what he'd done. I didn't believe him, but I went anyway." "Why?" Ellison asked. "Because I wanted it on record," Rowe said. "I wanted him to say it." He described the office meeting. Mercer offering money, threatening exposure. hinting that Rowe's past could still be destroyed if he didn't cooperate. The conversation escalated, voices raised. Then Mercer ended it abruptly. "He told me to meet him later," Rowe said. "At the marina." Ellison's jaw tightened. "You told us you were at home." Rowe nodded once. "I lied." According to Rowe, the marina meeting never happened. He waited. Mercer didn't show. Rowe left. End of story. Ellison didn't challenge him yet. She slid a printed phone log across the table. "Your phone pinged a tower near the marina at 12:14 a.m. Rowe stared at it. "I drove by." "Why?" "Because I knew something was wrong." Ellison leaned in. "Daniel Mercer was killed. His phone was hidden under your garage floor." Rowe's lawyer stepped forward, but Rowe raised a hand. He left it there. The room went quiet. Rowe explained that Mercer had come to his house earlier that evening, unannounced. He'd been frantic, paranoid, convinced someone was after him. He begged Rowe to hold on to the phone, said it contained everything. Proof. Insurance. Rowe agreed, planning to turn it over later. Mercer left. Alive. Ellison listened, expression unreadable. "And the basement?" Rowe hesitated. "I didn't know about it." That was the crack. Digital forensics pulled data from Mercer's phone. Messages, encrypted apps, burner contacts. One name appeared again and again: Lucas Hale. Hale was Mercer's fixer. Former private security. No fixed address. No active phone number. He disappeared the same night Mercer died. As Ellison's team closed in, things began to unravel. A key witness recanted, claiming intimidation. A piece of surveillance footage from a nearby gas station vanished from evidence storage. An anonymous tip warned Ellison to back off before this gets messy. Then the autopsy report came in. Mercer hadn't drowned. There were no signs of a struggle, no defensive wounds, no obvious trauma. But toxicology told a different story. A rare sedative was found in his system, one that caused disorientation and muscle weakness. It explained the lack of resistance, the surprise on his face, the shoes tied together. Someone had planned this carefully. Ellison stood in her office, staring at the report as rain hammered the windows. Two men had motive. One was in custody. The other had vanished, and the evidence didn't fit cleanly around either. Her phone rang, a restricted number. "Detective Ellison," a voice said, low and steady. "You're looking in the wrong direction." "Who is this?" A pause. "Someone who knows what was really in that basement." The line went dead. Minutes later, a patrol unit radioed in. A car had been found abandoned near the state line, registered to Lucas Hale. Inside the trunk was a single box from Mercer's basement, and a note taped to the lid, written in the same careful handwriting Ellison had seen on every file. "You're too late." As she stared at the words, Ellison realized the truth was no longer just buried. It was actively being erased. The trial began under a cloud of expectation. By the time opening arguments echoed through the courtroom, the case had already split the country in two. Headlines framed it as a battle between a wronged man and a fallen titan. Protesters gathered outside, some carrying signs demanding justice for Daniel Mercer, others insisting Evan Rowe was a scapegoat for crimes far bigger than one night at a marina. Evan Rowe sat at the defense table in a plain suit that didn't quite fit, his hands folded the same way they had been since his arrest. He looked calm, too calm. Cameras zoomed in on his face every chance they got, searching for cracks that never came. Detective Mara Ellison took the stand on the third day. She walked the jury through the evidence piece by piece. The basement, the files, the phone hidden beneath the garage floor, the cell tower pings, the sedative found in Mercer's system. She spoke plainly, without drama, letting the weight of the facts settle into the room. Then the defense stood up and began pulling threads. They reminded the jury that none of the basement files proved murder, that motive did not equal guilt, that Lucas Hale, Mercer's fixer, the man who vanished, had access to everything, that surveillance footage placing Rowe near the marina was circumstantial, that no one saw Evan Rowe kill Daniel Mercer. And then they delivered their most effective blow, A forensic analyst testified that the sedative found in Mercer's body was commonly used in private security operations. Lucas Hale had access to it. Evan Rowe did not. The room shifted. Ellison felt it immediately. The subtle change in posture, the exchanged glances among jurors. Reasonable doubt was creeping in, quiet and persistent. The prosecution called its final witness, a former associate of Mercer's, a man whose name appeared in several basement files. He spoke about threats, about being controlled through fear and leverage, about Mercer's belief that he was untouchable. He told me once, the witness said, voice shaking, that if anything ever happened to him, the wrong people would go down for it. The defense objected. The judge sustained it. The jury was instructed to disregard the statement. But some things couldn't be unheard. Closing arguments were measured, restrained. The prosecution painted a picture of long simmering resentment, of a man pushed beyond his limits. The defense framed Rowe as another victim of Mercer's manipulation, someone who held on to evidence but never acted on violence. When the jury retired to deliberate, the courthouse exhaled. Hours passed. Then a full day. Then another. Ellison sat alone in her office late that night, staring at the city lights. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. No text, just a photo. It showed a storage locker. Inside, shelves lined with boxes identical to ones found in Mercer's basement. There were more. Before she could respond, the phone rang. This time, the caller ID was blank. You see now, the voice said, calm, familiar. Mercer wasn't special. He was replaceable. Lucas Hale, Ellison said, a faint chuckle. He always thought he was the smartest man in the room. That was his mistake. Where are you? Does it matter? Hale replied, your jury's already deciding the only thing that does. The line went dead. Ellison reported the call, but there was nothing to trace. No location. No signal trail. Hale had disappeared again, taking the deeper truth with him. The jury returned the following afternoon. The courtroom stood as the foreperson rose, hands trembling slightly as she read the verdict. On the charge of first-degree murder, we find the defendant not guilty. A murmur swept through the room. Some gasped. Others cried out in anger. Rowe closed his eyes just for a moment, then exhaled as if he'd been holding his breath for years. The judge called for order. The verdict stood. Outside, cameras surrounded Rowe as he stepped into the daylight. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He walked past the crowd, past the signs, past the shouting, and into a waiting car that pulled away without spectacle. Ellison watched from the courthouse steps, the weight of unfinished business heavy in her chest. Justice had been served, the system said. But justice didn't feel settled. 3 weeks later, a dock worker found something lodged beneath a bridge 2 states away. Another body. Another man tied to Mercer's network. No visible wounds. No wallet. And tucked into his clenched hand, a scrap of paper bearing a single word. Next. Lucas Hale was never found. The additional storage lockers were emptied before warrants could be executed. The files vanished. The leverage disappeared. Cases tied to Mercer quietly collapsed one by one, without evidence strong enough to move forward. Evan Rowe returned to his life, or what was left of it. He gave no interviews. He changed his number. He moved out of state. To most people, he became a footnote, a man who'd beaten the system. But late one night, Detective Ellison received a final message. No number, no sender, just a sentence. He thought he'd walk free, and he did. But not everyone gets that luxury. Ellison stared at the screen long after it went dark, knowing the truth was still out there, unfinished and dangerous. And somewhere, someone was still keeping records. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Subscribe, because some cases never really end.